August 17th, 1661. Vaux-le-Vicomte, France. Nicolas Fouquet is throwing the greatest party in the history of the world. 6,000 guests, a 7-course dinner featuring food never before tasted in France, fireworks over geometrically perfect gardens, a play written and performed by Molière himself. The entire French nobility is here, including the king. Fouquet has spent the equivalent of $50 million in today's money on this one night. His goal? To honor King Louis XIV, to prove his loyalty, to secure his position as the next prime minister. By the end of the night, Fouquet is at the top of the world. The next morning, he's arrested. Within 3 months, he's convicted of treason and sent to the most isolated prison in France, where he spends the last 20 years of his life in solitary confinement. What happened? This is Law 1. Never outshine the master. The party that destroyed everything. Nicolas Fouquet was not just any finance minister. He was brilliant, charming, and indispensable to the king. He managed the entire treasury of France. When the previous prime minister died in 1661, Fouquet expected to be named his successor. But Louis XIV had other plans. He abolished the position entirely, and Fouquet could feel himself falling out of favor. So he made a decision. He would throw a party so spectacular, so magnificent, that the king would have no choice but to recognize his genius. The party would honor the completion of Fouquet's new chateau, Vaux-le-Vicomte, which had taken 5 years and an army of the best architects, decorators, and gardeners in Europe to build. On the night of August 17th, everything was perfect. The dinner featured exotic dishes from the Orient. The gardens, which would later inspire Versailles, were illuminated by thousands of candles. The fountains danced in perfect synchronization. And at the climax of the evening, Molière performed a new play he had written specifically for the king. Every guest was speechless. This was the most lavish display of wealth and taste anyone had ever witnessed. Fouquet personally escorted the young king through every room, every garden, every spectacle, showing him what true magnificence looked like. And that was the mistake. Because with every new marvel, with every gasp of admiration from the guests, Louis XIV realized something. The people were more charmed by Fouquet than by him. The finance minister had built something more beautiful than anything the king owned. He had thrown a party more extravagant than anything the king could afford. Fouquet had outshone the master. The next day, D'Artagnan, yes, that D'Artagnan, arrested Fouquet on the king's orders. He was charged with embezzlement. Most of what he was accused of stealing, he had stolen on the king's behalf, with the king's permission. But that didn't matter. Fouquet was found guilty. His estate was seized, and he was sent to a fortress prison in the Pyrenees Mountains, where he died 20 years later, alone. The psychology behind the law. So why did this happen? Fouquet's intentions were pure. He genuinely wanted to honor the king. He thought the party would demonstrate his loyalty, his connections, his indispensability. But he didn't understand the psychology of power. Louis XIV, the Sun King, was a man who needed to be the center of attention at all times. He could not tolerate being outdone in lavishness by anyone, and especially not by someone who worked for him. Every spectacle at that party sent the same message. Fouquet has better taste than the king. Fouquet has more money than the king. Fouquet's chateau is more beautiful than the king's palace. And the guests, the king's own subjects, were more impressed by Fouquet than by their ruler. It didn't matter that Fouquet meant well. It didn't matter that he was loyal. What mattered was how it made the king feel, and it made him feel small. Robert Greene writes, "All superiority is odious, but the superiority of a subject over his prince is not only stupid, it is fatal." After Fouquet's arrest, Louis hired a new finance minister, Jean-Baptiste Colbert. Colbert was famous for 2 things, his frugality and for throwing the dullest parties in Paris. Colbert made sure that any money leaving the treasury went straight into Louis's hands. And what did Louis do with that money? He built Versailles, using the same architects, the same decorators, the same garden designer. He threw parties even more extravagant than Fouquet's. The king had learned, if there's going to be magnificence in France, it will be his, no one else's. The right way, Galileo's genius. Now let's look at someone who followed this law perfectly, Galileo. In the early 1600s, Galileo was struggling. He was a brilliant scientist, but he had no money. He depended on wealthy patrons to fund his research, and the competition for patronage was brutal. Whenever he made a discovery, he would divide it among different patrons, giving one a telescope, dedicating a book to another, but the payments were always small and inconsistent. Then in 1610, Galileo discovered the moons of Jupiter, 4 of them, and he had an idea. Instead of dividing the discovery among multiple patrons, he focused on one family, the Medicis. And he didn't just dedicate the discovery to them. He turned it into a cosmic event that glorified their dynasty. Here's what he did. The Medicis had adopted Jupiter, the king of the gods, as their family symbol. So Galileo announced that these 4 moons appeared in the heavens at the exact moment of Cosimo II's coronation. He said the number of moons, 4, matched the number of Medici suns. And he claimed that the moons orbiting Jupiter symbolized how the 4 suns revolved around the founder of the dynasty. In other words, the heavens themselves reflected the greatness of the Medici family. Galileo didn't say, "Look what I discovered." He said, "Look how the universe honors you." The result? Cosimo II gave Galileo a full-time position as the official court philosopher and mathematician. For the first time in his life, Galileo had a stable salary. He never had to beg for patronage again. This is the law done right. Galileo made his patrons shine brighter than they ever could have on their own. He didn't challenge their intellectual authority. He didn't make them feel like mere financiers. He made them feel like gods. How this law applies to your life. You're probably not managing the finances of a king. You're probably not discovering moons. But this law still applies to you every single day. If you work for someone, you have a master, your boss, your manager, your client, and their ego is fragile, more fragile than you think. The instinct when you're good at your job is to show it, to prove your value, to demonstrate that you're indispensable. And sometimes, if you're really talented, you do it so well that you make your boss look incompetent by comparison. That's when you get fired, or sidelined, or passed over for the promotion. Not because you did bad work, because you made them look bad. The key is this: make your boss look good, not yourself. If you solve a problem, frame it as executing their vision. If you have an idea, present it as building on something they said. If you succeed, give them the credit publicly, and they will protect you. This feels wrong. It feels unfair. You did the work, why shouldn't you get the recognition? Because recognition is not the goal. Power is the goal, and you gain more power by making your superior feel secure than you ever will by making them feel threatened. Fouquet wanted recognition. He got prison. Galileo wanted security. He got a lifetime position. The difference was not talent, it was understanding the law. When to break the law, there is one exception to this law, and Robert Greene is very clear about it. If your superior is weak, if they're a falling star, if their power is already fading, then you can outshine them. In fact, you should. Greene writes, "If he is very weak and ready to fall, let nature take its course. Do not risk outshining a feeble superior. It might appear cruel, but if you know yourself to be more capable, bide your time and be patient." In other words, don't kick someone when they're down, but don't prop them up either. Let them fall, and when they do, step into the light. But if your master is strong, if they're secure in their position, then never ever make them feel small, because they will destroy you. Law 1, never outshine the master. It's uncomfortable. It feels like you're dimming your own light to make someone else shine. And you are. But the alternative is what happened to Fouquet. You can be brilliant. You can be loyal. You can be indispensable. And if you make your superior feel inferior, none of it will matter. This is not about fairness. It's about survival. And the people who survive are the ones who understand that power is not a meritocracy. It's a game. And the first rule of the game is never make the person above you feel like they need you more than you need them. Next week, Law 2. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. We're going deep into betrayal, loyalty, and why your closest friends are often your biggest threat. Subscribe if you haven't already. This series is just getting started.